I'm gonna say it, okay? Get ready, I'm gonna say it. Kawakami, best girl. We only go for legal women on this channel, okay, guys? I don't give a fuck.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
Persona. It's a series that the internet has chewed up and trampled on like a piece of gum left on the sidewalk. The amount of discourse, analysis, and critique surrounding this game series is about as overwhelming as a normal play session in one of the titles. I also understand that from the perspective of outsiders, the Persona fanbase can be a little too zealous in telling people why the games are the best things ever to them. The series has been critically praised for having a distinct gameplay dichotomy between its over-the-top demon hunting narrative and Japanese student life simulation. It's a type of dual narrative that has existed in many other forms of media in the past. This is essentially the video game equivalent of something like Power Rangers, Code Lyoko, Superman, and Batman. The idea of balancing a typical everyday life plot with some fantastical world-saving endeavor has been done countless times. At first glance, it's easy to see what the Persona series aims to do, and that's because of its familiarity. That's why it was difficult for me to really justify making a video on this series despite my love for it. What could I say that already hasn't been said by dozens or hundreds of people at this point? It took me a while to find out what I could offer to the discussion, and I think I've discovered what makes the Persona series special to me. A reason to cover the series that I have loved for years. So if you're expecting a deep analysis into the intricacies of each of the social links, or a dissection of the complex battle systems, you've come to the wrong place. No, what's on offer today is a thesis. A discussion of the aspects of this series that make me love it, an experience that I'm sure is shared by many. All I aim to do today is articulate where I find beauty in Persona, while also offering my critiques and laying out where I think the games can improve. Full disclosure, if you think this series is above criticism, this video might not be for you. Also, a lot of the footage here won't line up exactly with what I'm saying. These are all 100-hour JRPGs that I've already beaten multiple times in my life. I'm not going back to record footage for them now, unless you want this video to come out next year. I'll try to put a relevant image on screen here or there. Regardless, the Persona games are all about battling your inner demons, admitting your faults, and discovering what makes you unique. So it only seems fitting that we approach the discussion of these games in that same way. As I mentioned earlier, I'll only be talking about the last 3 Persona games. To an outsider that may seem odd, but the reason is rather simple. The things that I love about modern Persona titles only existed starting with Persona 3. Things like the social link system and general student life sim gameplay are absent from the first 2 games. Both Innocent Sin and Revelations feel much closer to Shin Megami Tensei spin-offs, with a subplot about high school students being thrown into battles with demons. I don't mean to diminish the legacy or quality of the first 2 games by saying this, but the things that I love about Persona lie in how our characters' everyday struggles and social issues intertwine with the demon hunting narrative. It's about how the game's commentary on society contrasts with the fantasy nature of combat. But to explain why modern Persona games are powerful pieces of artistry, we need to dissect each individual game. So let's get into it. Hi guys, Zach from the future here. So I want to preface this video with a bit of a statement. So right now it's 5 a.m. where I live. I'm editing this video and it's just dawned on me. I had no idea what I was trying to say at first. Now, the writing and scripting process for this video was a lot different than what my normal content is. Usually I go into a video knowing what I want to talk about, having a thesis and a plan laid out ahead of time. But with this, I just kind of was winging it. And I didn't realize until after the fact what I really wanted to say about this game series and everything like it. I want to reiterate from my earlier statement that this video is not meant to be a complex overview of any of the Persona games. I gloss over a lot of details for obvious reasons, brevity being one of them. But I think the goal of this video was to shed light on the social impacts of these three Persona games, which is a lot different from things that I've covered. You know, this is a channel about video games. Typically, we talk about video games and video game stuff, and this is very little in terms of actual discussion about the game and more about critical analysis of the underlying concepts of the game, which is, I don't know how to else put it other than strange. So yeah, this video is a lot stranger than my normal content. I hope you guys will like it all the same. I tried to put a lot of work into it, but looking back on it as I'm editing through it and listening to myself, I realize it seems a little unfocused, and hopefully that comes off as intentional. At the same time, I could see that compared to previous content I've made, that this doesn't gel as well with people. With that being said, so we are actually very close in terms of typical hours viewed for the channel of being partnered. Now, YouTube, a couple years back, YouTube talked about changing its partner policies. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with how partnering in YouTube works, it used to be the case that smaller content creators like myself could get partnered if they got enough views on their channel, but now they kind of have a base minimum requirement of total watch time hours and subscribers per year before you're able to seek a partnership opportunity on YouTube. What partnership opportunities do, there are a lot of things that it does, but in short, it will help the growth of the channel, help me do what I do. So if you guys enjoy the content that I make, the discussions I bring up, things that I do, I suggest, if you haven't subscribed already, please do that. I would appreciate it. I'm seeing a big discrepancy, I should say rather, in the amount of people who view my content and the amount of people who are subscribed to my channel. And that's a bit, no, you guys should totally hit the button down there. If you do enjoy what I do, please try to support in any way you can. Like the video, share it with some people who you think might be interested, anything like that to help me do what I do more consistently, more frequently. I make it no secret that I juggle a day job and doing YouTube, and this is just a big hobby for me. I just love talking about video games and shit. So yeah, okay, I've been holding this camera for like 10 minutes now. I need to stop. All right, to the video.
I've been waiting for this.
Student by day, demon hunter by night. Persona 3 is the game that set off the signature gameplay dichotomy of the modern Persona games, but that comes with a baggage of blemishes that comes with pioneering a new style of game. I remember when I was first exposed to Persona 3 and by extension the Persona series. I booted up a rerun of X-Play on G4 one morning in 2010. I know I was a few years late, and I hear Morgan say this.
Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3 wants you to know suicide is cool.
Wow, how derogative. Admittedly, Persona 3 is very brazen in its depictions of mental illness, but I think that's what draws a lot of people to it. Now, full disclosure, it might not seem like it at first glance, but I am an emo kid at heart. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the posters, vinyls, and collections of poetry I have sitting around my house, but I have grown up consumed by emo culture. Plus, on a more serious note, I have also struggled with diagnosed clinical depression nearly all of my adult life. Have you ever woken up tired and unmotivated? Your attitude and outlook are just sluggish one moment and irritable the next. Like the things you do just don't matter. Like one minute you feel like you're ready to take on the world and run a marathon, but the next you're lying in bed and can't be fucked to get up. Yeah, that was me for most of my young adult life. I'll be honest with you, I still struggle with these feelings even now. I have my good days and my bad, but I've learned to kind of live with it, like a leech to my side. So needless to say, this game's aesthetic was my shit. Teenage kids summon mystical creatures from their troubled psyches by literally shooting themselves in the head. All while this melancholic J-pop is blaring in your ears, the game constantly throws these images of self-isolation and escape from the noise of the world. Our character walks around with headphones blasting music to avoid social interaction. Fuck, the game opens up with Yukari doing this. Such edge, much wow. The main character is the literal epitome of edgy sad boy. He looks like the singer for Asking Alexandria. He looks like he'd be the first to line up for Warped Tour tickets in 2009 to be at the front of the mosh pit. Oh my god, no one's gonna get that, Zach. No one's gonna get that. Why did I write that? This game's many characterizations of depression are all filtered through the lens of our protagonists, who each cope with their undiagnosed mental illnesses in different ways. Akihiko takes out his frustrations and masks the sadness through intense physical activity. The main character remains silent and distant. Junpei hides his insecurities through his goofball, bone-headed demeanor. Yukari just tries to fit in with crowds and remain cheerful, despite how alone and isolated she feels to the world. Fuka tries to put a brave face on when it comes to her being bullied by other girls, but deep down she's insecure and her shyness reflects that. Each of these characters are complex people, coping with their trauma, loss, and depression in distinct ways that makes them feel like real people. The ways that they interact with one another and how they approach their emotions and come to terms with themselves is captivating and effective writing. This game makes me feel like I'm a school guidance counselor, getting a deep insight into each of these characters' struggles and psyches, watching them all accept who they are and cope with their problems. The game's main hook in this darker aesthetic lies in the dark hour, a hidden hour of the day that occurs after midnight where time stops, people literally turn into coffins, and demonic creatures rise from the depths of the earth. Many of the people who remain awake during this time and live to tell the tale develop a fictional mental illness called apathy syndrome. The only people who are able to handle and fight against it are told they have the potential, with the common thread between them being that they each suffer from manic depression due to past trauma in their lives. Perhaps this game's constant looming depictions of depression are why things like the exhaustion system exist, and why all these social activities that should often be fun and rewarding diversions from the combat feel draining. Maybe that's why your so-called friends will get butthurt if you don't choose to hang out with them because you stayed up till midnight studying for an exam. Maybe that's why some of these social links like the Magician and Moon are such insufferable pricks. Maybe that's why juggling dungeon crawling, social life, and academics literally feels overwhelming all of the time in this game. If the attempts to stick to this theme are why these gameplay inhibitors exist, good on the developers for sticking a key motif through all aspects of gameplay. However, this game is just seeped in so much bullshit that it makes it frustrating. Frustrating because I want to love this game, but I'm constantly reminded of how antiquated many of its design decisions are, especially after playing the later games in the series. So first, Tartarus is just annoying. If I haven't explained it already, Tartarus is a tower that envelops the game's school during the dark hour. Our cast has to ascend 264 floors of this tower in order to uncover its secrets and end the dark hour. The grind for this tower by itself is bearable, okay? I've trekked many worse mountains of the grind in my gaming escapades. The issue is all of this randomized BS and progression gating that's ridden throughout this entire journey. Every floor in Tartarus is random, and sometimes random anomalies that alter your gameplay and are designed to fuck with you happen. Sometimes your party enters a floor in entirely different locations. Sometimes no shadows will spawn, making it so that you can't grind EXP on that floor. Sometimes nothing but angry, powerful shadows spawn. On top of this, base Persona 3 lacks the ability to control party members. You can direct them to act certain ways, but for the most part, they are free to act however they want, and since they're AI, they lack the foresight to not attack enemies with elements that they nullify, or worse, reflect. nor do they realize how precious certain resources are and will use them wildly. Uh-oh, we climbed up a floor and Junpei spawned on the other side of the map and instantly died to an ambush of shadows. Yukari decided to use up our healing items instead of her own fucking spells. Everyone in your party is too tired to keep going and we get crit and insta-wrecked if you try to move forward. And I swear to God, Mitsuru, if I hear Marin Karen one more time. Now, I know most of these issues were fixed in Persona 3 Portable on the PSP, but I've actually never played Portable because A, it's hard to come across a PSP copy of the game, B, it's wildly considered to be the incomplete and inferior version because of its significant downgrade in graphics and the lack of the epilogue, the answer, that's included in Persona 3 FES. Plus, the game is just a downgrade overall. No cutscenes, no 3D character models. I've seen a lot of footage and it all just kind of seems so empty. Another critique lies in this game's plot. Plot really does not exist in this game. In fact, the game really lacks a hook up until we get introduced to many of the later characters and story dynamics that exist between them, like with Ken and Shinji, Mitsuru and Yukari, or Junpei and Chidori. The first 20 to 30 hours of gameplay are you just climbing the floors in Tartarus, fighting a powerful shadow and slowly getting introduced to the antagonist, Strega. A big hindrance of the majority of this game is the lack of a serious or compelling villain or force throughout the whole adventure. Strega is there, but the impact they left on me was devoid of any emotion. Aside from Chidori, and most times they just felt like a minor inconvenience than a villainous force. They were Team Rocket. Also, I don't really know where to throw this, so I'll put it here, but the voice work is really rough on certain characters in this game. Notably, Fuka and the chairman are just extremely stiff in their delivery, something I don't really think is an issue in the later Persona games.
As they say, the early bird catches the bookworm. Please forgive the pun.
Oh my god! Wow!
Future Persona games really benefit from having characters to tie to the Shadow boss fight. Literal rulers of the palaces manifest into villainous parodies of the real characters. This game misses that hook, and by extension misses any sense of urgency and pacing in the plot. I only felt like I had to ascend a certain floor in Tartarus by a date because the game told me to, not because of any plot motivators. And times where plot motivation did occur were crammed at the end of the game. Plus, the story beats and twists are so shallow and uninspiring. Like, who didn't see the chairman being evil from the outset when he's the only adult in the group, the one who can't use a persona yet is awake during the dark hour? Ryoji, the boy who's introduced way too late in the plot for anyone to care about him, becoming the literal manifestation of death and destruction of the world, is a little ham-fisted, but okay. The final boss is probably the most egregious thing about Persona 3. I could do without the philosophy lecture from Nyx after every single turn, and the boss just constantly regenerates its health or throws out some bullshit to pad out the fight, like putting up a shield that reflects all attacks, forcing you to put everyone on pause while you wait for it to stop. It's an unnecessary endurance test that lasts like 2 hours. It's not challenging. It's a waste of resources and time. But, Persona 3 is really good and I like the game a lot. So, I guess play it or, watch a Let's Play of it. Just, do something that can avoid the bullshit. Okay, cool.
We are living our lives, but with so much information.
I'm going to frame this in a way that my audience will understand. Persona 4 is the Xenoblade Chronicles of the Persona series. This game takes the base of what Persona 3 attempted and compressed it into a package that offers the best of all worlds. Sure, it's not as flashy as Persona 5, there aren't nearly as many graphic design as my passion moments in this game compared to its younger brother, and several key refinements of the combat and social link system are notably absent. But what's underneath the hood makes up for all of that. Persona 4 is a coming-of-age game at its core. Its charm comes from its pimply-faced, awkward teenage cast who are navigating through the social turmoils of young adulthood and discovering who they really are by beating the shit out of the physical manifestations of their inner demons. Everything about this game just reeks of high school. You have rumors of some mystical TV channel that shows you your soulmate, characters that are envious of their peers, characters who struggle to come to terms with their sexuality and gender identity. Sure, this game isn't as outright grim and dour as its predecessor, it's not constantly beating you over the head with symbolism of mental health disorders and suicide, but there still remains a disturbing mystery and sense of looming dread underneath the game's quiet, small town. The juxtaposition of the bright, colorful, and quaint exterior of the setting and the dark and mysterious undertones is a nice foil to the dreary, melancholic, and constantly serious vibes of the other games in the series. The student by day aspect of this game is notably the most dull in the series, but that's done with such a great intent. In this title, you aren't an orphan kid with a troubled past, or a disenfranchised youth with a criminal record. In this game, you're just a dude who was transferred to a boring town in the middle of nowhere because your parents are going on a long-term business trip. Despite your day-to-day life being set up with as much excitement as a field trip to the aquarium, Persona 4 has the best hook in the entire series. From the beginning, the cast is thrust into an outlandish, fantastical, and unexplained mystery that collocates with this boring setting. The small town of Inaba has been experiencing a wide number of inexplicable murders, with the victims' corpses hanging from telephone wires. These murders are somehow connected to a mysterious broadcast called the Midnight Channel, in which the victim's image and a subsequent parody of their hidden character flaws is displayed on TVs every night in some sort of premonition. Our characters are quickly given the ability to traverse into TVs and are able to use newfound abilities called personas and save these victims. I know hearing that plot description just sounds like an acid trip, but with how the game slowly feeds you information about its world and characters, this becomes more believable and nuanced with time, and I love it. After about 3/4 through the game, you'll be given enough information about the plot to piece together who the true killer is, and the murder mystery evolves into a game of Clue that took 100 hours to find the answer to. With that being said, when this game's student life elements get boring, they get really dull, like being forced to go to summer camp levels of dull. Many of these social links are easily some of the worst in the entire series. As I mentioned earlier, Persona 4 is a coming-of-age game at its core, and it's one of the reasons why I fell in love with it. Persona 4's main aesthetic is fog. Fog represents the uncertainty of these kids navigating through the turmoils of life. It speaks to the developmental issues of young adults in a similar way to Persona 3, only with its own distinct takes that aren't as blunt as 3's. Each character's shadow represents their problems in a way that's palpable and relatable. You have characters like Kanji, who struggles with his self-image and depictions of his own masculinity. His shadow is flamboyant and likes to get steamy. Then there's Naoto, a detective who struggled with her gender identity as a female to such a significant extent that she masqueraded as a boy because she was afraid of being looked down upon in her profession as a young female. Her shadow literally sets her up for doing gender reassignment surgery. These are some complex developmental issues for a game to tackle, and it does it in a way that's easy for youth to dissect, and nuanced enough to feel genuine. Couple that with a murder mystery story that hooks you with some seriously shocking events and themes, and that's a wrap. In retrospect, figuring out who the killer is was pretty obvious. Like, once you cut out all the middlemen, and when your likely suspects are proven innocent, there are literally only two options for who the killer could be, and one of them is very obviously not it. I'll give the game praise though. Up until the point where you're forced to figure out who the killer really is, they do a great job of masking that it's Adachi. This wouldn't be a discussion about Persona 4 without bringing up everyone's favorite bundle of joy, Nanako. A character who I could honestly make an entire video talking about the intricacies of. This is one of the few things I don't want to spoil, but I'll just say for the sake of brevity, that she's an amazing symbol of emotional maturity and innocent youth. Her sisterly bond to the main character gives the player an emotional connection between them, their avatar, and the world that he lives in. Her palace, Heaven, is beautifully representative of the innocent ways she views the world, while also representing all of the hardships and loss she's faced at such a young age with the loss of her mother and her question of the world as a result. She is a culmination of the game's celebration of youth, and is the reason that Persona 4 is one of the few games that's made me cry.
No money, no politics, no... Okay.
Persona 5 is the story of a bunch of teenage kids acting like Batman. It's easily the most refined entry in the Persona series, and from a design, aesthetic, and gameplay perspective, it is leaps and bounds better than any other entry in the series. The dungeons, or palaces in this title, have actual level design, and aren't just randomly generated treks through similar looking hallways. With real puzzles to solve, checkpoints to follow, and consistent themes in each palace, there's a notable improvement on the gameplay system of the series here. Gone is the random Yu-Gi-Oh card drawing bullshit minigames too. Now you have to coerce shadows to join you, a mechanic that's actually derived from the mainline Shin Megami Tensei games. And each shadow you see can now be converted into a persona to use. You even have a more easy way to track your social links, now called confidants. The game is also just a lot more forgiving overall. Difficulty spikes definitely exist, but aren't as frequent or frustrating as previous entries were. Persona 5's story revolves around the tales of disenfranchised youths who are perceived as delinquents because they don't want to be at the whims of cynical adults who aim to take advantage of them. It's a timeless type of narrative that encapsulates the way that every younger generation feels about the generation that came before. On top of this is a central theme of the discussion of mob mentality and how society leaves the masses jaded to abhorrent events that anyone with an innocent eye can perceive as being wrong. The students and staff ignore the obvious signs of abuse from a teacher because it's become the status quo, and that person has become an almost dictatorial and authoritarian figure of power and influence. But these praises in its story doesn't mean the game lacks its own problems. Where I think Persona 5 falters is in its delivery of its narrative. The content of said story is just as compelling as any of its predecessors, but the pacing can feel particularly sluggish in certain places, and some of the story beats and twists are about as predictable as a Dora the Explorer show puzzle. Don't get me wrong, I love this game, as I love all of the Persona titles, but my love doesn't exempt it from getting roasted on my YouTube channel. Persona 5 symbolism, themes, and imagery are a little too on the nose. Lust, vanity, gluttony, sloth, greed, envy, and pride. You literally summon Satan and shoot a false god in the face. Goro the Pancake Man exposes the fact that he can enter the metaverse at the beginning of the game. His betrayal also becomes really obvious as a result of that. My issue with Persona 5's narrative isn't the messages it displays or the topics it tackles. It's how reductive and one-dimensional these themes are portrayed in the story. After Madarame's palace, the cast constantly floats around the notion that that what they're doing, taking the law into their own hands, might not be the right thing to do. Akechi brings up that idea by presenting compelling arguments attempting to humanize the people who have been changed, and asking if forcing a person to have a change of heart is the right thing. Hell, in the beginning we're warned that Kamoshida might become a vegetable if we change his heart. But all of that discussion is immediately thrown out the window when we're introduced to Kaneshiro, one of the most deplorable and indefensible types of people. Manifest and written with the same tact of the Penguin from Batman. That's the issue with nearly every one of the people whose hearts you change. They're purely set up as parodies of the worst human traits, and thus it makes it really difficult to justify any moral struggle when your main targets are a pedophile and an abuser, a mafia boss who extorts kids for illegal activity and money, a prosecutor who not only turns a blind eye to the downtrodden and unjustly punished, but who also literally tells her teenage sister that she's a useless leech, a corrupt CEO who's also using his only daughter as a company merging tool through forced marriage, and a politician who has a history of domestic abuse and is the reason why your main character is treated like shit. If the game is going to throw these cartoonishly over-the-top villains at us, then there's really no need for it to also attempt to make us question the morality of our actions. I think that if the game wanted to make this message effective, there should have been at least one person whose change of heart led to a net negative or something that forced our characters to rethink their actions. What is the thread between these three titles? What connects these games in a way that makes them meaningful developmental experiences? Well, first, they each give us a distinct and unique slice of Japanese culture and life, and perfect for us weebs out there. Persona 3 gives us the experience of a boarding school student near an urban environment. Persona 4 offers a small-town rural setting. Persona 5 is a metropolitan, bustling city. Trivia questions in class offer different takes on lessons about history and art and Japanese culture. Going about everyday life makes you feel like a citizen inside one of these environments. Even experiencing the real Japanese holidays in-game and partaking in things that are exclusive to Japanese culture can feel immersive. The constant push and pull between the Japanese life simulation gameplay and the complex RPG battle systems offers variation and makes us feel rewarded for tasks that otherwise we might find dull. Later titles improved on this formula even more by connecting these two gameplay styles in a way that they each give us benefits and progression in the other, as a way to reward us if we prefer one gameplay style over the other. Each game offers compelling characters with relatable and realistically depicted social issues. Persona 3 portrays an exaggerated take on depression and mental illness that is so over the top in its depiction that the emo kids can eat it up. I should know, I'm one of them. One of the appeals of the goth aesthetic is how it plays at this depiction of these emotions that's performative and overblown, a cathartic way of expressing repressed feelings. When you struggle with manic depression, your issues and emotions seem a lot bigger than they actually are. It's why all of these emo bands are out here screaming into microphones with these anguished cries. Having an outlet that attempts to mimic these emotions with these characters who all share these almost comically tragic tales of loss and despair offers that audience the same cathartic release of their emotions through empathy, and perhaps in some cases even dwarfs the feelings that they hold. Persona 4 is a coming-of-age tale that describes in detail all of these characters coming to terms with who they really are and facing their inner selves. It's a tale of self-reflection and acceptance of their perceived flaws and developing character traits. Whether it's a character like Yukiko's struggle with her family legacy and personal freedom, Risei's identity crisis as a small-town girl at heart but an idol by design, Chie's seething envy and struggle with being the side friend, Kanji's masculinity and sexuality, or Naoto's gender identity and struggles with how her age and gender are perceived in her profession, each one touches upon problems developing adolescents come into conflict with at one point or another. Persona 5 is a generational story of the youth of today's world being used and trampled upon by the generations that came before. And with how horrible past generations have left our healthcare systems, economy, criminal justice system, and job markets for millennials and Gen Z kids, it's hard to not find the themes presented here compelling. The game's one central topic revolves around teenagers being taken advantage of in vulnerable and helpless moments in their lives, whether it's for Yuji and On's physical and sexual abuse at the hands of Kamoshida, the heavy expectations laid over Makoto's head by her sister and principal, or even your character's punishment by a greed-ridden politician for doing the right thing and assisting a woman in trouble. The game constantly offers us situations where innocent youths who should be experiencing the joys of cultural and emotional freedom are instead branded delinquents and shackled down by the unjust criminal justice system, bad faith actors, and status quo that normalizes adults taking advantage of these kids for their own self-fulfillment. Despite each game touching on distinct topics and social issues, the one thing that threads all of these games together is how they each offer the characters and players a way out of these struggles by essentially telling them, despite what the world tells you, you are special. And damn if that's not liberating.